Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Gabesty here. We're back with some more Hearthstone arena action in our Let's Learn series, and we're going to play a mage this time. So, just trying to get some class variety here in these videos, since I tend to personally enjoy certain classes more than others. But hopefully this will give some overview of how to play other classes. So, mage is all about spells, obviously. It has some of the strongest board clear mechanics, as well as one of the strongest hero powers. So first up, our rare pick. We have some good choices. Emperor Cobra. As you can see, it destroys any minion that's damaged by it. So this means unless the minion has Divine Shield, this can kill something with, virtually infinite health, basically, in one hit. So it can be really strong, depending on when you can play it. That said, as a normal 3-drop, it's got weak stats, so it will trade with their 3 or maybe their 4-drop, but at a 3 health, it can often be killed by a 2-drop from your opponent, so you have to be careful about when you play it. The Azure Drake is another really good card, very popular. 4/4 for 5 is quite below average in terms of stats, but you get to draw a card when you play it, and it gives you spell damage. So both of those things added together make this a really good card. However, as a mage, Blizzard is probably one of the strongest board clear spells in the game. It deals 2 damage to all enemies and freezes them, so even if it doesn't kill them outright, you can often follow up with your hero power to finish them off. So we're going to go with Blizzard as our first choice here. The Gurubashi Berserker is a very good card for a mage, particularly because you can damage it with your hero power. Now that said, to do that, it does cost you 7 mana in total, so you'd basically be getting a 5/6 minion for 7 mana. However, you can ping it a second time and a third time and so on, and it can go crazy. Arcane Intellect is a decent card as well. It's basically draw 1 extra card for 3 mana. That's the way to think of it. And then finally we have the Rifleman, which is underpowered in my opinion. I don't think it's strong enough to warrant the 2/2 minion that you get out of it. So I usually pass up this guy in favor of other cards. So in this case, these are difficult to pick from, so really I'm just going to let my mana curve dictate, and since I only have one card, which is a 5, I'll go with the Arcane Intellect here. But either one would be a solid choice, I think. Alrighty, so pick number 3, we have some more commons. Mad Bomber is a really good 2-drop. I really like this card quite a bit. He can often get 2-for-1 trades if you play him after your opponent's played a 1 or 2-drop. He can often, if you're lucky, kill what they played, and then also trade for something else later. The Razorfin Hunter is a decent 3-drop, but not great. In total, the stats are equivalent to a 3/4 for 3, which is decent, but because one of the minions is split off as a 1/1, it's slightly less powerful than just as 3/4 would be. However, Flame Strike is the king of all board clear spells. It's extremely powerful, and basically this ability requires that your opponent plays around the potential for it to be there. So you really need to pick up Flame Strikes when you see them in arena settings. Alright, so pick here we've got Nightblade, which is very weak in my opinion. 4/4 for 5 is no good. The battle cry of dealing 3 damage to the enemy hero is not worth the ability slot for this card. Basically, if this was dealing damage to a minion or to any target, that would be awesome. But simply dealing direct damage to the hero is generally not something you need to focus on. You usually want to control the board, kill off minions, and then you should be able to do equivalent of 3 damage at some point later in the turn or 1 turn down the road. Shattered Sun Cleric is a really strong card. 3/3 for 3 is, pretty average, but the battle cry makes it exceptionally good, so often you can buff your 2-drop and make a favorable trade. Frostwolf Warlord is a fairly strong card if you can play it with a lot of minions out. Ideally, you want to play it with at least 2 friendly minions out or more, and then it will be a 6/6 for 5. If you only play with 1 minion, it's 5/5, and if you don't have any other minions out, it's quite weak. In fact, if this is the only card you can play on that turn, you have nothing else out, it's actually a worse card than the Nightblade, and I really despise the Nightblade. So, because we're a mage, we typically won't have a lot of minions. I think the Cleric wins out here. It's quite a strong card. Alrighty, so here we have Murloc Tidecaller, which is very weak in arenas. You're just not going to have enough Murlocs. You can't really draft enough of them to warrant a Murloc deck. Violet Teacher is a decent card, especially with a mage, because you'll cast a number of spells, and each time you cast, you'll get a 1/1 out of it. Otherwise, if you don't cast a spell, it's a 3/5 for 4, which is average. Slightly weak, to be honest. Usually one a 4/5 for 4. But, once again here, Blizzard is the king. I think we're going to have to go with second Blizzard. I feel comfortable getting 2 of those. And as a rare, it's very difficult in a draft situation to get multiple Blizzards, so it's really something we shouldn't pass up if we have the opportunity here. So we're going to get Blizzard number 2. Alrighty. Next up, we have a Goldshire Footman, which is very weak. This card should really never be chosen by just about anybody. It just does not have enough stats to warrant the 1 mana minion. He cannot trade with virtually anything. He will die to most other things, and the other thing will stay alive. So, Snapjaw doesn't have enough attack. You could maybe use this in a priest deck. It has a lot of health, so you could heal it and stuff, but for a mage in particular, it's no good. And the Brewmaster is quite strong. It's a 5/4 for 4, which is great stats, and it has a battle cry where we can return a friendly minion to our hand. So that means we can use battle cries of other minions again. For example, the Shattered Sun Cleric, we could return that and buff something a second time. So Brewmaster is really good. Grab him. All right, here's some more pretty decent cards. Frost Nova it's a tough card to evaluate because, as you can see, all it does is freeze the enemy minions. So it's really just a delay card. There's no damage. You're just stopping the opponent from attacking you for a round. Now, sometimes that's all you need. For example, if you play this on, say, turn 4 or turn 6, the next turn, you might just be setting yourself up to play the follow-up Blizzard or follow-up Flame Strike to clear the board. Now, obviously, you would be spending 2 cards to do that rather than just the 1 if you'd waited the turn, but the Frost Nova would prevent the damage that you would otherwise have taken. So it's somewhat difficult to evaluate the power of that card. I think it depends greatly on what else you have in your deck and the style that you're playing. The Water Elemental is probably one of the best 4-drop minions, at least class-based minions. 3/6 for 4 is incredibly strong stats, and the fact that it freezes the character that it damages is really good. So what this means is you can, if you're able to attack your opponent, if you're playing against a druid or a rogue or basically anyone that has a weapon that's trying to attack you with their hero, you can freeze the hero and prevent them from attacking. Which, if you can do that a few rounds in a row, they're going to be in big trouble if they can't use their weapon. And of course, it works on enemies as well, minions as well. And then lastly, we have the Spellbreaker, which is a solid form of silence, probably the best form of silence for neutral cards. You get a 4/3 for 4, which is below average, but the silence puts it over the edge. So in this case, I think the Water Elemental wins out. We only have 1/4, and I think it's a really strong minion for Mage. Alrighty. Next, we have Darkscale Healer, which has below average stats. 4/5 for 5 is not very great. Usually you want a 4/5 for 4. But the battle cry restoring 2 health to all friendly characters, including the hero, can be quite strong in some situations. However, usually it's not as good unless you need those heals for other mechanics. So if you're a priest or something, that would be very useful. Ogre Magi is about average in stats, 4/4 for 4. And then the spell damage can be useful again if you take advantage of it, if you need it. In this particular case, though, I think Kono Cold is the winner. This is similar to Blizzard, sort of a board clear / board control mechanic. So it freezes 3 minions in total, and does 1 damage, of course. And like Blizzard or any other spell with freeze, you can then use your hero power or other spells to follow up and finish them off if this isn't enough damage. So I think getting a Kono Cold is worth it here. It's a really strong card. Alrighty, we've got Leper Gnome. This is an okay 1-drop minion, but I still don't think it's great. If you're going to play a 1-drop minion, it has to be 2 attack, but the problem is, with 1 health, this can die to a lot of hero powers and not really do anything. Now, it does deal 2 damage to the enemy hero when it dies, so you're virtually guaranteed to do at least 2 damage when you play this. So you could think of it as 1 mana to do 2 damage to the enemy hero, which is not great. Usually I don't think it's worth a card. Stormwind Knight is okay. Basically it's 2 damage for 4 mana, and then you're left over with some minion of some kind. Usually this guy will survive whenever you're attacking with 5 health. So you might have a 2/2 or something like that. And then finally we have Mirror Image, which for 1 mana and a card summons 2/0/2 taunts. And this card seems weak at first, but it actually gives you a lot of tempo and momentum, depending when you play it. So I think in this particular situation, I don't really have much need for the Stormwind Knight right now. I have 2 good 4s. So I think I'm going to go Mirror Image. I think it's the best of these choices. And again, it can protect us early game or even mid game and allow us to get some more stuff on the board that actually matters. Alrighty, next we have Mana Addict, which is a fairly weak card in arenas, especially. When you cast a spell, it gains 2 attack for that turn only. So the only way to really take advantage of this card, is if you play a lot of spells, multiple turns in a row, and can use this to do a lot of damage directly to the hero. But if you attack minions, which is usually what you do with your minions, is you try to kill their minions and keep yours alive, then this spell's not going to do very well, or this minion rather, because it only has 3 health. So there are a lot of minions that will do that much damage to you. So usually this is a card where you're playing a very aggressive constructed deck, and you have a lot of just direct damage spells, and you want to buff this up and attack with it the next turn, that kind of thing. Cold Light Seer is pretty weak. 2/3 for 3 is bad, and again, you're not going to have enough Murlocs to use the Battle Cry. Plus, it actually buffs all Murlocs, so if your opponent had one, just happened to have one out, that would be just as good for them as it would for you. So Kodo's the pick here. He's a below average in terms of stats, 3/5 for 5, but if you can destroy a minion when you play him, he's really strong. So we're going to grab him. Alrighty. Next up we have Bluegill Warrior, which is basically 2 damage for 2 mana that obeys attack rules. It's alright. Not great, but alright. Darkscale Healer we talked about, and Cone of Cold we talked about. So let's take a look at our mana curve a bit. Number of cards. I'm fairly confident still that I can get some decent 2-drops with, what do we have, 19 picks left. So I'm going to go with the strongest card in this selection, which is Cone of Cold. That would be the second Cone of Cold. That would give us 2 Blizzards, 2 Cone of Colds, 1 Flame Strike, which is pretty decent. I don't have any single target removal, but for board control, that's really good. Alrighty. Speaking of 2s, here's one of the best ones. So I think I'll grab this guy. Briefly, we'll talk about the Worgen. He's a decent 3-drop, especially for a mage that can attack, or that can hit him with your hero power. So you play him, and then the next turn you use your hero power for 5 mana total between the two. You can make a 4/2 with Wind Fury, which is quite strong. Often you can get either 2-for-1 trades, or more likely you do 4 damage to the enemy hero, and then you trade your Worgen for something else that's on the board. So that can be solid. The Stormpike Commando is the big brother to the Rifleman, which is the guy. This is the guy I prefer if you're going to play that sort of card. 2 damage for 5 mana, and you're left with a 4/2 minion, which is pretty decent. The 4/2 minion can often trade evenly, or slightly below, I should say, in terms of minions it kills, and then sometimes you can get a second kill with the deal 2 damage. But Fairy Dragon is the winner in this particular situation. It's one of the best 2-drop minions, at least the neutral ones. 3/2 is the ideal, and it can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. And we need 2, so we're going to get him. Okay. So now we're seeing some weaker cards, but that's fine. It was bound to happen. So we talked about Frost Nova already. It's difficult to categorize this one in terms of power or value. Thrall Farseer is not strong enough, especially in a mage deck. You're not going to really have any buffs for this thing, so it's basically just a 2-3 for 3 with Wind Fury. Because the 3 health, it's likely that it won't be able to do a 2-for-1 trade because whatever attacks the first time will probably kill it. So it wouldn't attack a second time. So best case, you would attack the hero once and then attack a minion and trade. Something like that. I think the Archmage is the best pick here, simply because it has enough health that it can survive usually at least one attack, maybe get a trade 1-for-1. And as a mage, it does give us some spell damage. The best consideration as well in this case is that it's our only 6-drop thus far, so it fits nicely into our mana curve. Alright. A few more cards I'm not a fan of. Booty Bay Bodyguard. This one in particular I think is really weak, and I find a lot of people play this card, and it never really works out for them. So the problem is the 4 health for 5 mana. There are a number of minions, we might even see a mage version of one, for 3 mana that have 4 attack. So they could kill this with their 3-drop, in theory, which is no good. The Ice Barrier is probably one of the worst secrets that a mage can get, in my opinion. It's, you can think of it as heal your hero for 8 for 3 mana, which is okay. But most of the time, you're better off using this card slot for something that would actually give you control or advantage on the board and thus the game itself. There are situations, of course, where healing for 8 would be the difference between life and death, but those are pretty rare compared to what would normally happen, where this is kind of just a wasted play, or you don't really need the healing, that kind of thing. So I think the pick here is the Reckless Rocketeer. It's not fantastic, but it's basically 5 damage for 6 mana. So we can think of it as a very weak fireball as a mage that has to obey attack rules. Yeah. So not great, but it's the best of these choices in my opinion. Okay. So we have some more pretty good choices here. Bloodfin Raptor is just a standard 2-drop, 3/2 for 2. Nothing special about him, so usually you want to pass him up if you have a better 2-drop. That better 2-drop would be the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Again, 3/2 for 2, but makes our spells cost 1 less. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spells so far. So half of our deck is spells, which is pretty good, actually. That makes me think very carefully about this pick, because I think Water Elemental is an exceptionally strong 4-drop. But I only have 1 2-drop, and the Sorcerer's Apprentice could be a lot of value if its spell reduction actually comes into play. For example, we could play this on 2 and play a Mirror Image for 0 mana. Or we could play this on 4 and play a Cone of Cold as well, the same turn, something like that. Or Arcane Intellect. So yeah, actually, I think because of the number of low mana spells that I have, the likelihood that I'll get this plus one of those is pretty high, and that might be enough to push it over the edge. But I still think Water Elementals are a really good card. I just need the 2s, I don't want to lose momentum there. Okay, so Dread Corsair is terrible unless you have a really good weapon, but that's difficult to rely on, and obviously as a mage you don't have any. The Razorfen Hunter is slightly below average. It's basically a 3/4 in total for 3 mana, but because one of those minions is a 1/1, that can die to a lot of random hero abilities, so it's kind of weak. Scarlet Crusader is one of the best 3-drop neutral minions. Because it has 3 attack and Divine Shield, means it's basically a 6 attack minion, if you can attack twice, obviously. So that's really good. So we're going to go with Scarlet Crusader, even though I have quite a few 3s already. Alright, Murloc Raider, it's a bad 1-drop, no ability, not worth it. Talked about the Bodyguard. Fireball is a very well-known card, and it's a really strong one, so we're going to pick it up. It's our first single-target removal spell, and it also allows us to either choose to do direct damage to the enemy hero or to remove a minion. Okay, Darkscale Healer we talked about, Warlord we talked about. Silverhand Knight's one of the best 5-drop neutral minions. In total, it's a 6/6 for 5, which is great. And because the split minions don't have 1 health, the squire has 2 health, it can't die to hero powers where other split minions often do. So these are all 5s. This is the best one, especially for a mage, so we're going to go with the Silverhand Knight. Okay, we talked about Cone of Cold. Ice Lance, I don't think this is a very strong card, I'll be honest. You can see that it freezes a character, and if that character is frozen, it instead deals 4 damage to that character. So 4 damage for 1 mana is obviously really strong. Like, that's great. The problem is that a Frostbolt deals 3 damage for 2 mana, freezes the character as well, so you don't actually have to have them frozen already before doing the damage, and consequently would allow you to spend 4 mana to do the 4 damage that the Ice Lance plus a pre-freeze would do. So, in other words, like if you had to freeze something beforehand with, say, a Cone of Cold or another Ice Lance, it's going to cost you some mana beforehand to do that, right? And then use the Ice Lance with 1 more mana for it. So in total, Cone of Cold into Ice Lance is 4. A Frostbolt that then freezes and then use your hero power is 5. So you spend 1 more mana, but you don't have to rely on 2 cards to do it. I don't know. It's sort of a convoluted way to say I don't think Ice Lance is strong enough to warrant a card unless it's a constructed deck that focuses on freeze. Now, we do have a lot of freeze here, but again, I don't think it's worth it. So the choices are Cone of Cold or Ironbeak Owl. Usually I prefer the Spellbreaker over the Ironbeak Owl, but we do need some 2 mana cards. We probably won't play this on 2 unless there's nothing else to do, but I think I have to pick it up for a potential silence mid to late game, as well as something to play on 2 if needed. Alright, so we got a Master Swordsmith. It's a pretty weak card unless you can protect it very reliably. Otherwise, it's just a 1/3 for 2. It's not going to be able to trade with anything on its own, and it will die to most 2-drops your opponent would play. Plus, its ability only actually works at the end of the turn when you have another minion out. So you would have to play something on 1, then play this on 2, and have the minion that was played on 1 then get buffed if it's still alive. Or, play this on 2, and then they don't kill it, and you play something on 3, and so on. So it's difficult to do, especially if you don't have protection. Corsair is just overall bad. You're much better off getting an Ooze, because it will remove the weapon outright from your opponent, whereas the Corsair just removes 1 durability. Sometimes that's the equivalent of destroying the weapon, but for stronger weapons, it will not remove it. It just, take off 1 durability. So again, we'll go with Kodo number 2. I prefer not to get another 5, but he's a decent 5 if we can kill something, as we mentioned. Aha, well, speak of the devil, there's the Ooze. So Shield Bearer is just a bad card. The only way this is viable is pretty much in a priest deck that can buff its health and its attack, through Inner Fire and stuff like that. But even then, I wouldn't really recommend this card. We talked about the Archmage. We have one, in fact, just because we had to. But the Ooze is the clear winner here. We need solid 2-drop stuff we would want to play on 2 if we had to. And if we don't have to play him on 2, he's great for the mid to late game to get rid of a weapon at some point. There's nothing more frustrating as a weapon user than to play your big weapon on 5 or 7 or whatever and just have it decimated because the opponent saved their Ooze. Okay, well. So we have Magma Rager, which is bad. It has a lot of attack, which is tempting, but the 1 health means it's just going to die to just so many random things that you can't keep it alive. There's just almost no way to do that. The other 2 we talked about quite a bit, so really this is going to be a choice about mana curve compared to card quality. Now, if you look at our mana curve, we have a decent number of early game, and it kind of starts to slack in the mid game, and we have virtually no end game. We also have 2 Cone of Colds. Let's see how many spells would be buffed by spell damage right now. 2 Cone of Colds, Fireball, Blizzard, 2 Blizzards, and a Flame Strike. I mean, Cone of Cold seems so strong. But I feel like I really need some late game cards. Archmage is not a great one at all, but as a mage, it does have the potential to give us some cool stuff. So, like we could even play these two on the same turn, at turn 9 or 10, and do 2 damage to three enemies for the Cone of Cold, which is like a pseudo blizzard. I don't know. I think I'll go with the Archmage, but it's tough. I don't really like any of these picks in this particular situation. I really can't imagine. I mean, let's look at our deck. We have a few decent 2-drops, about 3 of them. We have Mirror Image. We have 2 3-drops, minions this is. 2 4s. So it seems like with that few number of minions early game, leading into the mid game, it's unlikely that the Warlord's going to be able to get buffed if he's played on 5. So, he may come out as a 5/5, probably the best case scenario. Unfortunately, I'd like a 4, but these are not 4. Well, I think I have to go Ice Lance here, simply because it can synergize with the Blizzards and the Cone of Colds. We have 4 freezes right now. It would obviously be best if we had some Frostbolts as well. But I just don't think these 2 cards are going to be valuable enough in the deck that we have so far. And we may be able to do a combination of Ice Lance with one of our Blizzards or Cone of Colds in the late game to kill off a minion that would otherwise be really dangerous. This is especially true because we only have 1 direct damage spell right now. We don't have any polymorphs either. So I'm going to go with Ice Lance. Well, there's a Frostbolt. So we got 2 5 minions, both of them pretty good. Ventrico Mercenary, 7/6 for 5. It's extremely good stats. But the ability, making your minions cost 3 more mana, can be a double-edged sword, of course. Usually when opponents see this card, they get pretty scared, and with good reason. However, if they're able to control it from, stop it in some way from killing a lot of things, but keep it on the board, you're going to be in trouble. You're not going to be able to play anything else along with it for, quite a while because of the extra minion mana cost. So playing this card just depends greatly on what sort of support you might have and how comfortable you are in controlling the opponent's board. Frostbolt is one of the best direct damage spells. 3 damage for 2 mana is great with the freeze as well. So, yeah, it's just good. And Tiger is also a pretty good 5-drop minion. Because he has stealth, you get attack initiative almost every time. So you can do 5 damage when you want to. Or you can just stay stealthed and, hang out. So let's take a look at our mana curve. For 5s, we have 1, 2, 3. Probably won't play Blizzard on 5. For 2s, we have 1, 2, 3, because we probably wouldn't play the Owl. So it's basically an even comparison in terms of which one, 5 or 2, we could use another drop of. That said, I think because of the synergy with our other freeze mechanics, I'm going to go with Frostbolt. And the reason being, worst case scenario is we use this on 2 to kill whatever they played on 2. Almost everything they play except a Fairy Dragon could be killed by Frostbolt. So if we need to, maintain board control for whatever reason, we don't have anything else to play, that's a fine card to use. All right, well, more freezes, apparently. The other option is a Mirror Entity. Mirror Entity is tough this card can be obviously really strong, but a smart opponent will play around it. That said, I think it is probably the strongest. Well, no, I take that back. It's not the strongest secret, but it's a decent one. We already talked about Frost Nova. It's more of a delay. We already talked about Ice Lance. So, based on the number of freezes, I wonder if I should just go with Ice Lance here. We have 5 cards that do damage and freeze. So Ice Lance would be a second Ice Lance. And basically we'd be playing this deck as a complete control deck. The problem is we don't have a lot of direct damage to deal with the opponent, so while we would maybe be able to stop their creatures, their minions, I'm not sure that I'd be able to deal enough damage to them. On the other hand, I don't want to get Frost Nova, so the other option is Mirror Entity. And that's only good if the opponent basically makes a mistake or has no choice in terms of what they play. So I think I'll go Mirror. But it's close. Wow. All right, well, since we're going for board control, we might as well get Flame Strike number 2 and just call it a day. 2 Blizzards, 2 Flame Strikes, 2 Cone and Colds. Can't really do much better than that. The other option is to get the Fairy Dragon. That would give us 4 2-drops. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that'd be 5. But it's not quite as important that we have control of the board at that point in the game, because we have the ability to board clear. So yeah, I think Flame Strike is just too good to pass up, so we're going to grab it. Alright, Lord of the Arena. Talked about this card in the past. Suffers from the same issue of the Booty Bay Bodyguard. It doesn't have enough health to warrant the mana cost. So 5 health dies to a lot of stuff that is lower mana cost than this. I would rather have a Boulderfist Ogre, which is a 6/7 for 6, but doesn't have taunt. The taunt doesn't justify the low health, in my opinion. We already talked about the Stormwind Knight. Sinjin Shield Master is one of the best 4-drop minions. He's not quite as good as a Yeti, but the taunt will protect you because he has 5 health for 4. He can often survive against, multiple attacks basically around that turn. So the opponent's 2 and or 3-drop usually will be required to kill this, and he often will kill them in exchange. We also need 4 drops. It's our lowest right now, so we need that mid-game, so we're going to grab him. Alrighty. Coming down to the last few picks here. Frostwolf Grunt, very weak, not good enough for 2. It's just a 2/2. You want it to be a 2/3 with a good ability, or a 3/2 with a good ability. Taunt is not good enough. The Smith is average unless you have a weapon, and then it's great, but we obviously don't as a mage. Harvest Golem is one of the best 3-drop minions that's neutral. Basically, 2/3 is not great stats for 3. Often you can get a 4/3, but because he has a death rattle mechanic, you can usually kill whatever it was they were trying to kill with this, or just you trade 1 for 1, and then you're left over with a 2/1 minion. So Golem's the winner. All right, and I don't think there's much choice, but we'll go through. The Wind Fury Harpy here is not strong enough, in my opinion. This card is best suited for paladins, druids to some extent, shamans for sure, where you can buff the attack of the minion when you're attacking on the turn after you play it. But otherwise, the 5 health just means that you're probably going to die to a minion that you're attacking. So it has to be buffed in some way to survive that minion, or you buff it and then just attack the hero directly with the Wind Fury and, do 14 damage or whatever amount it is. Worgen we talked about, Fireball we talked about. In this case, I have plenty of 3s right now. I also only have 1 direct damage spell, which is another Fireball, so we're going to get a second Fireball. Pretty obvious choice, I think. Last choice, last pick. So Arcane Golem is not strong enough. It's 4 damage for 3 mana, but it's kind of difficult to say it costs 3 mana because it gives your opponent a mana crystal as well. And that can be really bad. It basically is equivalent to a druid playing Wild Growth for free. So you basically are saying, I'm playing Wild Growth for you when I play this card, which is not awesome at all. Because it has 2 health in addition, usually it's going to die to whatever you attacked, unless you attack the hero, which would usually be a waste anyway. So, no good. Blade Master is a pretty good 3-drop. It's 4/3 when it's played. And if you can heal it, it's really strong. It can be up to a 4/7, as you can see, for 3, which is insane. However, we don't have any heals as a mage, and we don't have any heals, in our deck anyway. So, not so great. In this case, Sunwalker is probably the best pick. It's a pretty good late-game drop. 4/5 with Taunt and Divine Shield. 4/6, so the stats are not great, but because of the Divine Shield, often you can at least get a 1-for-1 trade, and sometimes even a 2-for-1. So, we also don't have very many great late-game minions. In fact, we don't have any good ones. So it's mostly, like I said, a control deck, but that's the best choice there. All right, well, yeah, I think we have a lot of good spells here. So it's really just going to be a matter of being able to keep the few minions that we're able to play between our spells and our control alive, protect them long enough to finish the opponent off. I think what would really push this deck over the edge is a polymorph, or 2 would be ideal. 2 polymorphs, or at least 1 polymorph and a pyroblast. That would give us some finishing power on the hero. Without polymorph and only 1 silence, which is an owl, the main thing that we're susceptible to is really strong single minions. So legendary minions with death rattle effects, just really powerful, like 8/8 taunt, from druids and stuff like that. Those might be a little bit difficult. Stuff with Divine Shield. We can ping the Divine Shield off with our hero power, but it's usually preferable to just use a polymorph and take care of the Divine Shield at the same time.